Everyone, welcome to the Chattin podcast. We're about to introduce you to our first guest.
Very first guest, and I know everyone's been long awaiting this one, so make sure you pay close attention because I'm sure some amazing stories and laughs are about to be shared. It is the one and only Carole Baskin.
Hey, all you cool cats and kittens.
Oh, that's amazing. See,
the signature line has come in.
I think you only said it once during the Tiger King filming on the show. You only said it once, but it's stuck. I think people are wearing it as t-shirts and everything at the moment.
Was that how it came about? That wasn't a catchphrase that you decided to create.
Oh no, I've said it for years and years and years. But what surprised me was that it was only mentioned one time in Tiger King, and everybody was like running with that line, and it was like, why did that appeal to people so much? I wasn't aware of.
I think it's Well, it was just a magical line, I think, because that line kind of, whether you wanted it to or not, kind of created your bubble of, this is my kind of character and persona, whether it's intentional or not. That line, if you hear it, you know exactly where it's coming from.
Yeah, no, it's definitely like your catchphrase. I think you had some that you made into hats and stuff that were selling. Oh, what was the phrase? There was another one, but it didn't seem to have stuck quite as hard.
There was a number of them, like "Are you kidding me?" and
that was
asking for a Baskin.
Yeah, I saw all of those. But this, hello, all you cool cats and kittens.
I love it.
Yeah, definitely.
I have to ask. This is something I've been intrigued in for a while. So, do you spend a lot of time around the tigers themselves, personally?
Every day I go into the sanctuary and I work 7 days a week. But I don't do any of the hands-on animal care. So I don't do the feeding or the cleaning. That's all done by volunteers and has been since about 1998. But like yesterday, and every day is different here, but yesterday I got a text that one of our Savannah cats, which is a cross between about a 40-pound serval and a domestic cat, which is a stupid idea. They never work out as pets. But this lady had paid $17,000 for the cat. Tried for 5 years to make a pet out of it and finally gave up and gave it over to us. And the cat has always been really healthy and chatty and loves to eat. And yesterday when it was feeding time, he didn't come out to eat. He was just looking all pukey in his den. And so I was called in because that tells you there's something really, really wrong. They don't fake being sick. If they're sick, they're really sick. And the vet said she wanted us to give him some Urine, which is like an antibiotic. And I think it helps with their feeling nauseous, and giving fluids. So if you've ever seen, like in a hospital, how they have a bag of fluids with an IV line, this is what she wants me to do to this crazy freaking cat. And so we have a squeeze cage, which is made for it. We had to go in and net the cat, put him into a cage, and then you can squeeze him up against the top so that he's flat, so that you can actually give him these injections. And I've never seen any cat except an ocelot do the gymnastics this cat did in the cage to avoid that needle. And we only got about 50 of the 150 cc's of fluids into him that we wanted to, but he did get the medication. So he's feeling a little bit better today.
Wow.
So I go in for that kind of stuff because we can't just let our volunteers do that. But usually it's my daughter.
Oh, okay. In that situation, how on a level are you with the tiger itself or the animal, depending on the cat? Do you feel a sense of understanding from the animal that it knows that you're there trying to help, that it knows that you're the good guy? It doesn't care. It doesn't care.
Yeah. They do not care. And I've had situations over the years where a cat came to me. His name was Scratch, and he was 17 years old. He was a Cooper, and he was so close to being dead that I actually picked this cat up and carried him into my dining room and just laid him on the table and gave him fluids. And from that day forward, that cat lived to be almost 30 years old. He was like 1 or 2 months shy of being 30. Yeah, so that's like 3 times longer than they usually live. But that cat was always, he just hissed at me every time he saw me. And I thought, the only reason you're alive is because of me. And yet he had no appreciation whatsoever.
Ungrateful.
And I love that about them. They just call it like it is. They're not going to pretend to like you.
I think that proves that you have a real passion for it, because if you're pushing through that and it's something that you're still willing to do and you want to help the animals, even though they're scoffing at you as you're trying to extend their lives by 15 years, then no, that's true work. that's crazy.
Yeah, it's from my reading and research that I've done, I know that you've pretty much always being someone that stands up for people or creatures that can't necessarily do it for themselves. So can you tell us a little bit about Smokey and how you come across Smokey, your first, I guess that's your first rescue of some description, the alley cat with the kittens?
I don't remember how Smokey came into my life, but it was a turning point for me. So I had, we lived in a trailer park, and my father was flying for the governor of West Virginia. It was Governor Archmore, and my mother was a secretary. And so we were latchkey kids is what they called us back then, where I was 6 years older than my brother. And so I took care of him during the day. And I had this domestic cat named Smokey, and she had a litter of kittens. And so she had her kittens in a drawer in my bedroom. And my grandmother, who was very wealthy, I had like two mothers growing up. I had this poor family, which was my family, and then I had my grandmother, which was this wealthy family. And so I'd be shipped back and forth when I was younger than this between the two of them, and grew up knowing both of them as my mother. And so my Mama Jackie was what I called my grandmother. She insisted that proper young women did not have stray cats, that I had to have a poodle, and I'm not a dog person. So I really rejected the idea of having a poodle. And then she said, well, how about a purebred cat? That would be proper. Having this cat is not proper, and we need to take her to the animal shelter so that she will find a new family for her and her kittens. And, I cried all the way to the shelter and gave up the cat, and didn't know then. I found out a few years later that most of the cats that enter shelters end up being killed, because there's just too many of them and they can't adopt them all out. And so that was what started me on this path to end the killing of healthy cats and kittens in shelters due to overpopulation by aggressive spay and neuter programs. And so I started like rounding up all the kids in the neighborhood, and we'd wash cars and we'd wash trailers and we'd cut people's grass and walk their dogs. And I was managing this team of kids that we were raising money, because I felt like this was going to be hugely expensive. I found out that it was like millions of cats were being killed every year in just the US. It was like 3 or 4 million cats a year. And so that was my quest from the time that I was a child, was to build up a business that would be financially strong enough that I would be able to do that. And as a result of being in veterinary offices, I came across bobcats that had been, the vets, they can get hit by a car or shot by a hunter, and the vet can fix them up in 30 minutes or so. But then you're talking about months sometimes of rehab before they're strong enough to go back to the wild. So I started doing that when I was 17. I left home at 15 and was already on my own by the time I was 17. So I started rehabbing and releasing native bobcats, because this was one of the big things in Tiger King that I found people didn't understand. They thought any wild animal could be released to the wild. And the only animals that are legal to release to the wild are those who were born in the wild. So bobcats that have been hit by cars can be fixed up and put back into the wild. But bobcats who were born on fur farms or as pets, those aren't legal to release. And so I got a lot of flack for not just going out and turning loose all of our cats. It's like, do you really want me to turn loose 50 big cats in Tampa? You gonna feel good about that?
Yeah, that's not ideal.
So you'd never take any cat out of the wild or the natural habitat that it's in for your park. It's never anything. That's not something that would happen. It was animals that weren't fit to be returned back into the wild. Is that right?
Yeah, so there have been some of the bobcats over the years that had permanent damage that made it impossible for them to hunt or to survive. We had one that was bitten through the head when she was a kitten, and she's just never been right.
Mm-hmm.
She can't hunt. We have another one that, because his pelvis had been so badly damaged, that he can't pass fur or feathers. And so he has to have a diet where all of that is taken away from the food before he eats it. And he just, you can't tell him, okay, go out there, but don't eat any fur or feathers.
Yeah.
So he's stuck in a cage for the rest of his life. But Most of the cats that we have rescued over the years were actually born in captivity. So the lions and the tigers and the leopards and all of those were born in cages, mostly by people using them as pay-to-play props. And then they can only use them for, 12 weeks, 16 weeks before they can take a finger off a child, and then they get rid of them. They typically hand them off to private owners who think stupidly they're going to raise a tiger as a pet. And then about a year later, when that cat's 200 pounds, they're on the phone to us asking us to get it out of their yard.
Oh, by the way, this grew up. This is now, it's not this cute little kitten I had when I first got it. Yeah.
I think that's the point that Tiger King failed to get across, is that you care about the animals. You're actually thinking about them, and it comes from a real place of love and passion. You're not just taking them the same as the other parks were. Because, I mean, I was just a casual watcher of it. I can't say I watched it with subtitles on and was going for it hardcore, but the perception that I received of it was, okay, well, you got the Joe Park where it all seems really sketchy and it's obvious to me that it's weird. Then there's yours, which is so much of an enigma, and I think that's because they were trying to portray it as something that it's not. It confused the hell out of me. I was like, well, she's not doing much different. Like, what's the difference in the park? So I can see the sort of the righteous attitude of it, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm saving them from him. It's like, well, they're still in cages though. But the crucial information is that some tigers aren't actually able to go out again into the wild and to be released. Am I correct in saying that?
None of the cats who are born in captivity can be released. It's not legal. And
that's all you took.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we've never taken those cats out of the wild to put them into cages. The only ones that are, like I said before, ending up in cages are the native bobcats who can't be released because of some health issue. But every year we return as many of the bobcats who can be fixed up and released back to the wild. And that's the best part of what I do, is being able to open that cage and seeing that cat get a second chance at life, or sometimes a third or fourth chance at life, judging by the way they look when they come in. That's what we live for, is that kind of thing. I think you're right that the producers of Tiger King tried very hard to make it look like a sanctuary, which is what we are, and a zoo, which is what Joe Exotic and those other guys were, was the same. And I don't understand their thinking behind that, because they knew different. We talked to them for 5 years about the differences. Talking to you in this 30, 45-minute conversation, you'll be able to understand everything it took me 5 years to tell them that they chose to ignore in order to produce something that would be entertaining.
Because a good story needs a villain.
Yeah, that's
unfortunately.
But so I know, but some of the viewers and listeners at home won't. When Netflix came to you about Tiger King, that's not what they sold you. When they first inquired with you, you thought you were getting a completely different show. Can you explain to us and the viewers at home?
I didn't know
what you thought you were getting?
Yeah. Did you guys see Blackfish, about orcas in captivity?
Yeah.
Donna would have.
So that was such a powerful film, because what they did was they interviewed all of these trainers of the orcas at SeaWorld and these other aquariums, who came out and said, this is a very cruel industry. These animals are tortured in order to perform. They're taken from their families in the wild. They're living this miserable life, and they're dying young in these concrete swimming pools. And when the public saw that, they were like, oh, heck no, we're not going to go to SeaWorld. We're not going to go to these orca shows or these dolphin shows. And so those industries had to change the way they did things, like stop taking animals from the wild and stop breeding them for life in cages and stop making them do stupid pet tricks. And it was so effective. And so 5 years before what ended up being Tiger King came out, it wasn't Netflix who came to us, it was the producers. So the producers came to us and said, we want to do the equivalent of Blackfish for big cats, because there are all these people who are clearly exploiting these cubs and these big cats. And, you can't be in this world and not know about big cat rescues. So that's how they came to us. And so for 5 years, they told us they were working on a film called, I forget if it was called Stolen World or Stolen Wildlife, but that was the working title of it. And they said it was being sold to CNN, which was the same company that bought Blackfish and did such a great job of getting that out to the masses. You know, usually when you see a documentary about something, it ends up on like page 680 of Netflix or something where nobody's ever going to see it or know about it. But CNN made a huge push for Blackfish. So for 5 years, we were talking about the issues, talking about how none of these cubs that are bred serve any kind of conservation value, because the breeding that's done by these backyard breeders is for a 12-week window, like 8 to 12-week window that they can use the cubs. And so they want cubs that will stay small, so they will purposely inbreed and try to create, you know, big litters of very small cubs that stay small for a long time. And then they don't give them, they're never allowed to be with their mother. They take them away immediately. And I think that was the only good thing about Tiger King, was it showed that one scene where the mother was giving birth and they were taking that hook and dragging the baby out across the rocks and then squeezing it through the wire because they wanted to use it as a pay-to-play prop. That's how all of the cubs in these places are born. They're born into that kind of a situation where they're immediately taken away. They never get to go back to their mothers. You can't buy tiger milk anywhere. And so what they're getting is usually goat's milk replacer or maybe kitten milk replacer or puppy milk replacer, but it's not sufficient for the kind of animal that they are. And these people don't care because they can't use it after about 12 to 16 weeks anyway, because even if you withhold, you know, calcium, which they do to keep them smaller and lighter weight, because like Florida has a law that says you can't handle a cub over 45 pounds. So they starve it. They don't give it the calcium that they need for strong bones because bones are heavy. Mm-hmm. And then they're discarded as soon as they can't use them anymore. And so I don't know if I said it, but despite that poor nutrition, they can still take a finger off a child by the time they're 12 weeks old. So that's why they're not supposed to use them after 12 weeks. And so they have to be breeding constantly because they only have a 1 month shelf life of being able to pimp them out. And as a result of that, you end up with all of these cats being dumped into private ownership or ending up fueling the illegal trade for their parts. And so this was the information we were giving the producers and giving them all of the experts in the field. You know, there are a number of tiger experts who talk about how our problem here in the US with so many of these big cats being bred and born and discarded is actually causing the extinction of the tiger in the wild. And this was the show we thought they were going to do. So during that period of time, we were also working with a number of other producers. We were working with Mike Weber, who did a production called The Conservation Game. And it showed how this whole thing started in the United States. And that was these faux conservationists like Jack Hanna and Steve Irwin and Boone Smith and Grant Kimmerer. They would go on to the late night shows with these cubs and everybody would ooh and ah, and it was so funny and people just loved it and the ratings went up and they'd have celebrities posing with the cubs. And then people saw that and a bunch of people thought, I want to do that. And so it created this industry for breeding and cub petting. And then other people thought, I want to be that cool guy walking the tiger on the leash. And so that's where you got your Joe Exotics and your Doc Antles and your Mario DeBros and all of those guys. And so that film exposed all of that. And yet you've never seen The Conservation Game because there's not a single channel that is willing to air it because they've all been complicit in this industry. And they can't admit that by showing this film. So, you know, there were a number of other films that we worked on during that period as well. And so when the trailer came out for Tiger King and people were talking about this show called Tiger King, we contacted everybody we were working with and we were like, who's working on that show? Because none of the people that we knew were working on that. And, you know, everybody in Hollywood knows what everybody else is doing. So we thought somebody would know. And the producers that eventually produced Tiger King, all of a sudden it was crickets from them. They didn't want to talk about it. So it came out. My husband and I binge watched it just like everybody else because we could not believe what we were seeing.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, we said, wow, that was just such a missed opportunity. Here they had all of this great information. And why did they need to make me, the one person who's trying to stop these bad guys, the villain, when they had so many villains already?
It's easy.
Yeah,
because it's not a bad it's not a bad show. If you look at it as a show, it's not a bad. But I think you hit the nail on the head with wasted opportunity, because you got the amount of footage that you had and the access you're granted in that situation. The easy takeaway was, wow, I didn't know that world existed. Now I know that there's a world of tigers and that happens. That's cool. It's a positive documentary. Well, whereas if you did it how it was supposed to be done, by the sounds of things, you would have got a really hard-hitting, informative, educational documentary that would actually expose what you gave them permission to film for in the first place.
Yeah.
And instead you ended up with a Frankenstein of clips that I'm sure that half of which you didn't even realize the context in which they would edit into it. Was there any areas when you binge watched, as the whole of the UK did, you got us through the first lockdown, but the binge watching, when you were watching it, was there any clips where you were like, that wasn't the question I was answering?
Go
ahead.
There was so much of that. And so I ended up sitting down and watching it 7 times. And what I did during that 7 times was I went through minute by minute. Okay, when this is being shown on the screen and this is what you're hearing in your head, this is what was really going on in real life. And so I put that together as a ridiculously long page at bigcatrescue.org/Netflix, because Netflix ended up, and I forgot to say, but CNN ended up not buying their project. And so when they couldn't sell it to CNN, that's when I think they really changed directions and turned it into this freak show for Netflix.
Yeah, so the original plan maybe did exist there, and at some point along the path, they went for money, I guess.
They realized they couldn't sell that. They couldn't sell the documentary that told people
as easy.
Yeah,
but they will sell it eventually.
Yeah, as easily as the as what they released, because what they released was sex, violence,
that's my cat,
and just pure chaos. We've got a cat.
My cat's trying to get in.
Should I let
her in? It's only right, isn't it?
Yes, you should. The cat mom is in the room.
That's it. Yeah, we've got my wife's the biggest cat mom I know, and she's a huge fan. So she's currently wearing a tiger jumper in support of the podcast today. So
a tuxedo.
I should have let her walk over on her own. She doesn't particularly like being picked up. But that does really nicely lead me on to a question that I had, because I can barely understand what's going on through my house cat's head, let alone a big cat. Do you even try, or
can you?
Yeah.
We're always looking for cues from the cats. So like with the keeper with Beecher yesterday, the Savannah cat, the keeper noticed that the cat didn't come running up for food. The keeper noticed that the cat was kind of like doing this kind of thing in the back of the den, like, oh, it feels so gross. And we're always looking for anything that's going on with that cat, whether it's boredom, which is the worst thing that I think that these cats deal with. They don't want to be in cages. And, even though our cages are 10 to 20 times larger than the ones at the GW Zoo, in Tiger King, what people saw were the feeding boxes, and everybody was saying that was our whole cage. It was like, are you kidding me? That's just where the cat comes in for food and water. And you can see, if you look, there's a door open to the rest of the cage that the cat can go out into, but people didn't see that.
And I've seen aerial footage of of the Big Cat Rescue Center, and you can physically see the small caged area at the front of each one of the cages, which is all they showed on the show. And you can see what they've done. They cut the scene there and ended it there because the camera was panning round to show the rest of the enclosure.
Your cat is so beautiful.
She's chilling, she sensed the cat energy around here and somehow has found her way into this room.
Oh, bless. So we have, I have some more questions regarding the threats that you've received from the Tiger King, from the backlash from the show. Now, we all know that Joe Exotic, I won't give him too much publicity in this podcast, but he threatened your life, but it didn't necessarily end with him being arrested and taken away for that. You got quite a lot of backlash from regular people. I know that there was cases of graffiti at your park, and emails, phone calls come through. How do you deal with things like that?
Well, first off, it didn't start with Joe and it didn't end with Joe. And so, Tiger King, the show, tried to make it look like there was some kind of a personal feud between the two of us. And I've never even spoken to him. I go after anybody who is abusing big cats. And so I have a site at 911animalabuse.com. And what I do is I keep track of all of these guys and women too, that are exploiting cats or that I feel are abusing cats. And then I post there every time they have citations from the state or from the USDA. And I put it all in one place. These guys change their names all the time. And so it was actually my husband who took over Joe's page because he had 21 different names that he was operating under to try and hide from these bad citations that he had. And so what I do is I make one page and say, okay, Joseph Schreibvogel is, and then here's the 21 different names that he works under, and listed all of the abuses and things that had happened there. And as a result, those guys hate me because they don't want anybody to know that information. That's why they keep changing their names. And as a result of that, I have been physically attacked twice by the same guy, a local guy here. I have been threatened, I don't even know how many times. And even with Joe, there were two people that reached out to me in, I think, 2014 and 2015, saying that he had tried to pay them to kill me. They weren't even the ones that were in the murder for hire suit. And so, this was just an ongoing thing with him trying to silence me any way that he could. And so after Tiger King, I think what the producers did that was such a betrayal. I mean, it's one thing for them to sell out, and that's what I think they did, was to make money by selling out and changing the narrative into something that was purely fiction and make it look like it was a documentary. But it was a totally another thing, I think, for them to try and cast Joe as a sympathetic character who was set up, and this bitchy woman is just giving him a hard time, and it's all her fault because Joe will tell you it's all my fault. It's all her fault that he's in jail and that he killed those tigers, and that all of this is my fault. I think he would still say. And by them giving him a bullhorn to make those accusations without anything to the contrary to say, wait a minute, that's a lie, then it created a whole host of crazy people out there who watch a TV show and think they're going to settle the score and free Joe Exotic by killing me. And so I have on that page, bigcatrescue.org/Netflix, I think it's down toward the bottom, I put the first 3 hours of those verbal threats that I got and the emails and the posts online of people threatening me. And it was so graphic, YouTube made me take it down. So I had to put it on Vimeo and put a Vimeo link on that page because it is so vile what these people are saying. And my phone rang off the hook every 5 to 10 minutes for 3 months straight with people making these accusations. I only recorded the first 3 hours of it. And it was like, if that doesn't show you what the problem is here, I can't document it enough.
Yeah, it's because even at some points watching it, you think, oh, maybe Joe is the good guy. And you go, no, wait a sec. Everything that's going on here is just a complete and utter mix of emotions, and it's entertainment at the end of the day. It's being thrown at you.
Yeah, I think it was very well edited for entertainment purposes. If you take away the fact that these are real people and real people's lives that they're manipulating to look a certain way, Like you know, everything you do is for the cats. I know you've got a real estate business that you do alongside your big cat rescue. I'm sure that at the moment, especially, that's having to subsidize the big cat rescue because if I know right, people can't go to the big cat rescue sanctuary, can they, at the moment?
Yeah, we closed our gates on March the 15th of 2020 because of COVID. And then on March 20th, 5 days later, Tiger King came out. So in addition to being concerned about COVID and our keepers catching COVID from visitors, now we had a bunch of crazy people piling up outside saying they were going to burn the place to the ground. So we sure couldn't open the gates.
Wow.
Yeah. So we still have not reopened. And what's been discovered in the past year or so, maybe a year and a half, is that cats can contract and die from COVID. And so we've had to continue to keep our gates shut, which is a loss of over $1 million a year. Now, currently, my real estate business is not having to supplement the sanctuary because we're still able to raise the $3.5 million a year we need to keep the sanctuary going. But that extra $1 million a year that we had from our tours were the things that made it possible for us to support conservation efforts in the wild. And in fact, we are still dipping into reserves for that because we want to continue to support things where people are doing either studies or working with local communities to save cats in the wild. And we donate over $100,000 a year to those projects. But things like our educational outreach, and I had to let go half of my staff. We had 22 staff and we had to let go half of them. So the half of us who are left are doing twice as much work for the same pay in order to keep the place going.
It's impressive that there are that many people who are willing to come together and sort of contribute towards it. Like it's a communal effort, I think, is the message that kind of needs to be conveyed. It's not all you can't do it all on your own. People need to come together and help. Obviously enough people are at the moment, but it could be a lot more.
Our donors have been great through all of this.
Yeah, no, that's it. And even just like the investments that you made just before you had to close down. So again, it's just through me doing little bits of research, you'd upgraded the gift shop there that's got, you know, stock sitting waiting, but unfortunately it's dead stock. You'd have to, I think maybe we'll have to try and arrange like an online auction for some of the things to try and get some more funding in. But yeah, no, it's amazing what you're doing, and you're up against it at the moment, we can tell. And yeah, just bless your volunteers and your staff for carrying it on. Now
we'll see the Carole Baskin cut.
Yeah,
all that Tiger King footage. If we get all the footage together,
that's
and let
it.
You have your way with it properly, with a proper team. Get CBS, was it involved? We don't have CNN. We don't have those channels over here, so it's just letters to me.
Yeah, that's it. So
I play my game.
Oh yeah. So George, during our podcasts, George likes to make games for people, and if you're up for it, he would like to play the game with you.
Yeah, it's nothing too intense or daunting.
I suck at games, but I'll try.
It's fine. It's more just a funky trivia. I have a little jingle for it, so I'm going to play that just so we can all hear it together now, and the listeners at home will be able to hear it too. Here it comes.
Asking Baskin.
Little roar on
little
it as
roar
well.
On the end.
Okay. So what I wanted to do is, so you see on Instagram pages and just online, if you're looking in the right places like I was, occasionally really random and obscure tiger facts pop up. So I was wondering if I could throw some tiger facts at you that I found online, and you can tell me if they're real or fake, or there's quite a few I'd be interested to know a little bit more about. Is that something that you'd be happy to do?
I can give it a shot.
Okay. My first one, it says, tiger urine smells like popcorn.
Sometimes it does, yeah.
Sometimes. So depending on what they eat, maybe.
Yeah. It seems to be actually more like per cat. Like some cats smell that way and other cats definitely do not smell that way.
There's a range.
But I guess they would communicate with their urine in the wild, they're able to indicate different whether they were healthy or whether they were in heat. I don't know if the cats do in heat.
That's cats, yeah.
Yeah. So if they're in heat, they would indicate it through their urine. I think maybe you've just adapted the nose to be able to understand the language they're trying to share.
Like a connoisseur, a connoisseur of tiger urine. This one says a tiger's roar can be heard from 3 kilometers away.
How far is that in miles? Do you know?
That's a good question.
3 kilometers.
Done.
We've got our fact checker who's going
Just over 2, I think.
Yeah. So
That's probably true, because lions will have about a 5-mile range.
What's the loudest roar that you've heard? Can you remember it? Lions. Yeah, okay. Right.
What I didn't realise, and it was quite recent, I will
carry on.
What I didn't realise is that because when I think of a lion, I think of like a huge cat. And I think of them as like one of the biggest cats. But a tiger is significantly larger than a lion, though, isn't it? Like
it can be. So like we've had tigers that were 280 pounds full grown, and we've had tigers that were 750 pounds full grown, whereas the lions are usually between 400 and 500 pounds.
Right, okay.
That's my way. This next part says that tigers vocalize to improve their roar. Now, I like working on music and and I try and improve my singing all the time. The image of a tiger in a sanctuary, not a cage, singing or roar, practicing its roar. Have you ever seen a tiger practicing its roar?
Well, I hear the cats roaring a lot, and what if they were ever practicing, it would be in their casual speech, which is kind of it's like a mooing sound, and they will just moo and moo and moo and moo when they're talking to you. But when they're roaring, usually they'll stop. But when you walk up, it's like, kind of like impolite to roar right in your face.
Oh, they've got manners as well. I like this.
They watch their decibels just to make sure they're not too bad. Okay, this has been my last one, I think. This one says that tigers have spiked penises. Is that true? Spiked?
Actually, all of the cats are like that. That's why when cats mate, when the male pulls out, you'll notice the female just kind of flips all over the place. And it's my understanding that that's what causes the eggs to be released so that they have a better chance of being fertilized.
Oh, okay. It's just like proper evolution, how to do it
Yeah,
properly.
that seems quite. Why do females always get the raw end of the deal? This is sort of, they never come off happier, do they?
We've got the spikes.
Yeah, we've got the spikes. They give birth.
They raise the cubs.
They raise the cubs. The male just goes off and
the milk.
Pees his popcorn pee somewhere else.
Leaves his popcorn urine to the side.
Oh, yeah, no, that's
To be fair, I've got one more. This one leads me on to a nice question that I wanted to ask as well. It says habitat loss and hunting has caused the shrink of the tiger range, which puts it lightly. True or false?
Yeah, it's definitely true. We've lost over 95% of the tigers, just the tigers, in the past 100 years.
That's wild.
Those are crazy numbers. Mm-hmm. I read somewhere, I haven't looked too far into the facts, but it seemed quite crazy. There's more tigers kept in captivity in the US by like non-zoos than exist in the wild.
Yeah, there's only about 3,900 tigers left in the wild, and in captivity in USDA licensed facilities in the US, they've only ever done a count once, and that was in 2005. And they counted over 5,000 tigers back in 2004 or 2005. And then if you figure every year they're breeding at least 200 cubs, just tiger cubs, not counting all of the lion cubs and leopard cubs, but 200 tiger cubs a year are bred to be used as photo props and then discarded. So from 2004, 2005 going forward, you can see that number could only have increased, right? And yet the number of tigers in the wild is only 3,900. So this is a big part of why the captive breeding in the US is causing the extinction of the tiger in the wild. And that is because it's always going to be cheaper to poach a tiger in the wild for its claws and its bones and its pelt, because you're talking about maybe $3 for a bullet. Whereas to take all of those things, the teeth and the claws and the pelt from a tiger, you have to raise them up until they're 3 to 5 years old. It costs us over $10,000 per year per tiger, just in food and vet care, not any of the overhead of the sanctuary. So you would have $50,000 invested in a tiger before it was big enough to take those items for the illegal market, whereas $3 to shoot one in the wild. So all of these cats that are being bred in captivity, and it's not just here, it's also about 8,000 tigers in cages in Asia that are being farmed like cattle for their teeth and bones and claws, even though it's illegal. They're doing that because they're counting on us completely extirpating the tiger from the wild, and then it won't be illegal because there won't be an endangered species, and then they can sell all of these tiger parts into the markets that are being grown by virtue of the people normalizing those kinds of products in the environment. So that's why I believe we're going to lose the tiger in the wild in the next 5 years if we don't stop the cub petting this year.
What can we do? What can I do? What can someone like me do to help? Obviously, donating is a massive part of it, but there's a part of me and there's a part of other people that will be listening as well. I know that well, obviously that's horrendous. If I could press a button right now and release all the tigers into the wild, I would do that. Like, no issue right now. What's the step beyond having that thought? Because it's easy to think that and then, well, okay, now I'll just forget about it. What's the one? Is there something perhaps other than donating that people can do to just spread awareness and help?
The two biggest things that people can do to protect tigers from extinction and to save them from all of the abuses that we've been talking about don't cost a dime. And that is, if you're in the United States, go to bigcatact.com, fill in your name and address. It will know who your member of Congress is. It will create an email for you. It will create a tweet for you. And it'll even give you a script where it will actually dial your member of Congress for you, your 2 senators and your House representative, and you just read the script. And if you're shy, do it on the weekend or after hours. You're just going to be talking to an answering machine. But getting the Big Cat Public Safety Act passed, which is what that bill, that URL does, is critical. If you're not in the US, there is still such a huge thing that you can do. And that is, I'm sure you guys have seen on social media, these guys that are rolling around on the ground with lions or walking a tiger on a leash or driving around in a Lamborghini with a cheetah in the front seat. They only do those things for attention and for all of the, oh, that's so cool, and I want to be like you, and all of that crap. And they can only do that while those cats are under 5 years old. As soon as they're anywhere from 3 to 5 years old, they will kill their owner. And that's when they get rid of them and get a new cub to show off with. But when people see a 200-pound cat, they think it's an adult. It's a yearling sometimes, or they see a 500-pound cat and they think, well, that's got to be an adult. No, it's probably about 4 years old, 5 years old. And so when you see those kinds of things on social media, call them out for the jackasses that they are, because they're the people who are causing the extinction of the tiger and all of these other big cats.
Absolutely. And you were talking about what is in the wild, what gets taken from the tigers, what they're used for, and obviously Chinese medicines, and I use medicines in air quotes, but your first bobcats that you bought them because you had gone to an auction. I remember hearing a story. Could you share the story of the auction you went to when someone told you why they bought the cat?
Before I do that, one of the things I want to address is the traditional Chinese medicine community. They have actually been our partners in the International Tiger Coalition, which was started back in 2006, and it's about 40 big animal protection groups that join together to try and save the tiger. Amazing. And the traditional Chinese medicine community realizes that there is no medicinal value to tiger parts, and they state that publicly. The value for those animal parts is not so much as medicines as it is the cultural idea of them as having been medicines And so these are usually things that are used as bribes for government officials, which makes it even harder. So things like tiger bone wine is one of the biggest uses of tigers. They take their bones and they seep their bones in vats of rice wine and then bottle that wine and sell it for many hundreds or thousands of dollars. And that is considered a luxury product, just like having their skin as a luxury product. So it's all a luxury market. It's not anybody that really believes that this has any medicinal value anymore, because they understand that.
Wow.
As far as buying our cat at the auction, so I had done bobcat rehab and release from the time that I was 17 until I was 30 something. And my husband, Don, and I were at an auction buying llamas. And we would turn the llamas loose on big tracts of land because we're in real estate. And the llamas clear about eye level, and then you can move them to the next piece of property. So they had a great life clearing property. Some people call them llama lawn care, which I thought was funny.
Trademark.
And so we were at one of these exotic animal auctions, and a guy came in with a 6-month-old bobcat that his wife didn't want anymore because it started being a bobcat. And once they start to become sexually mature, they don't want to be your pet, and they start biting and scratching and peeing all over everything. And they do that to mark territory. And let me tell you, no bobcat smells like popcorn.
Maybe salty popcorn.
No, not even close.
Okay.
I mean, that stuff will just eat the drywall right off your walls. It is so acidic. It's disgusting. And that's when people get rid of them. And so she was getting rid of this, and the guy brought it to this auction, and this cat was just terrified. But I knew it was captive born, and I knew I couldn't release the cat. So it didn't even occur to me to bid on the cat. And the guy next to me started bidding. And so I leaned over to him and I said, when that cat grows up, she is going to tear your face off. And he said, I'm a taxidermist. I'm just going to club her in the head in the parking lot because I'm going to make a den decoration out of her. And I realized I can't let this guy buy this cat. And so I started crying, and my husband started bidding. And we probably paid more for that bobcat than anybody's ever paid for a bobcat in the history of bobcats, but she was not going to get killed in the parking lot. And so we brought her home. Well, now we got this cat. She's born in another state, which is another reason why she can't be released. And she's been declawed, which means she can't hunt. And it's not legal to release her in the state she was born in, or my state, Florida, because she was born in a cage. And so we had her in the house, and she was as wretched as you can imagine a pet to be, and was just terrorizing everyone. And so my husband started calling around to see if he could find somebody that had a bobcat that she could grow up with. And he finds this guy that says, yeah, but you got to come here in person. And so we got Windsong in 1992. And it was 1993 before he found this guy in Minnesota who said he would sell us a mate for her. And so we drive up there. And when we got there, I didn't know people wore cat fur. I'd never heard of that before, but it turned out to be a fur farm. And he had 56 bobcats and lynx that he said he was going to raise up and kill the next year for their fur. So we came home with 56 bobcats and lynx. And I very stupidly thought, well, we'll just put them into pet homes. You know, at least we saved them from the taxidermist, or from the being turned into fur coats. And about a year and a half later, all those cats started coming back to me because people were like, I can't live with this cat. This is just too much work. And they were right. I mean, they are too much work. Nobody's prepared for that. And so they all start coming back. But meanwhile, we had gone back, bought all of the adults off of that same fur farm with the agreement that they never kill cats again for their fur. And they still raised fox and mink, but not cats. And then we found another fur farm in Nebraska. We bought all of the cats out of that fur farm. And with each one of these, we made the agreement with them that they never kill cats again for their fur. We also went on years later, as we started taking in lions and tigers and leopards, to have people sign a contract with us stating that they would never participate in the trade in these cats again. And if we ever even saw an image of them on social media posing with a cat, that they would be liable for their cat's care from its entire life. So if you figure a tiger that we take in is going to be $10,000 a year, we just had a tiger recently die at the age of 25. You're talking about $250,000 that they would be liable for if I caught them taking a picture with another cat. So that has worked. We've never found anybody that broke our contracts, thankfully. And I think that that's really critical when sanctuaries are doing rescue work, is to make sure that they're not just enabling bad behavior and allowing the people to just go out and get new cubs, because that's not fixing anything.
So it's like, it's almost how that stemmed the sanctuary becoming a thing. Is that correct? Just before but yeah, so the moment of you sitting in that auction room, it stemmed everything. Like you sat there thinking, wow, I can't let this guy, I can't let this guy win. Screw it. I mean, you'd be acting on emotion, and that's the definition of it. You're going for it there, and then from then on out, set you on this intense and amazing path of getting the cats, releasing the cats, bringing the cats back. I just find it really interesting how most of it can be boiled down to you feeling torn about not letting that cat die, because that cat, even though it's only one cat that was in the auction, it clearly represents a lot more than just the one cat that it was to you.
And I think everything happens on purpose. And I think everything happens for the good. And so, when that happened, I thought, well, I can fix this. This guy's not going to kill this cat in the parking lot. And when I saw that all of those cats were going to be killed in the fur farm, I thought, well, I can fix this. I'll just, buy these cats and put them into good homes. And what I discovered was it was not as easy to fix as I thought it was. My mother always said, if you throw enough money at something, you can fix it. I've been throwing millions of dollars at this and I haven't fixed it yet. So I think I was really naive thinking that I could fix this, but we're closing in on it. We're going to be, I think this is our 30th year, 1992, 2022. Yeah, this will be our 30th year in November.
If you weren't naive, then none of the work that you've done now would have happened. It's necessary.
Well, I'm just really glad that the guy who was bidding in the auction had the audacity to say, oh, I'm just going to club it in the head, because if he just stayed quiet, you may not have ever tried to rescue it. So him being arrogant saved, I'm sure, thousands of cats.
Yeah, and the whole fur industry, I think, as a result of not only Big Cat Rescue, because we have campaigned against fur from that day forward, but we've also, partnered with all of these huge organizations like World Wildlife Fund and the Humane Society of the United States and the International Fund for Animal Welfare. I mean, all of us work together to end these abuses. And by 2018, almost all of the fashion industry had said no more fur.
Yeah,
you see a lot more of that now. There's a lot more people that, I mean, it's still not the majority, but there's a lot more people that are the fur thing definitely is at a point where it irks people. And I think that's the level we need to get animals in cages and zoos at as well.
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. No, but I just want to say to the audience at home, this is your villain, the person who's spent their life trying to save. Doesn't seem very villainous to me. No, that's it. So
we've been had.
Yeah, we've been had. Well done, producers. They confused the whole country, I think.
No, they didn't, because this holds so much more meaning than that show ever will. Obviously, we still don't know you, but after an hour's conversation, whatever that is, just wiped. Which is a shame that you haven't got the time to sit down with every person on earth and explain yourself.
Yeah, they say 64 million people saw Tiger King within the first couple of weeks of it coming out. And there's been nothing since then that has had that kind of viewership to show the real issues here and how desperate the tigers are, how close we are to losing them. And when I say tigers, I'm talking about all of the big cats, because they're just, every one of them is just right behind the tiger, and some of them in even worse shape, like the moor leopards and the snow leopards. But it's all things that we have done as a human race in taking away their habitats and treating them like commodities. And we can turn it around. And the things that excite me the most and that make me jump out of bed every morning and work until dark is that I think we can save the cats in the wild through monetizing them. And I think that's the only way that we can save them. And so my vision of being able to save these cats is to have 360-degree cameras in the wild that are internet streaming, so that everybody in the entire world can see these cats where they live, doing what they do, teaching their children about the role these animals actually serve in the ecosystem, watching them hunt, watching them mate, watching them raise their cubs in the wild where they belong. And we have to pay for that privilege.
It's like a subscription, like you would have to any like Netflix or Disney Plus or whatever. It would be the same sort of thing. It would be a subscription, like
Yes.
big cat
I'd
cams.
subscribe. I think a lot of people would subscribe to that.
But the key is those subscription fees, the lion's share of that needs to go directly into the pockets of the people who actually live there. And so that's why I'm so into cryptocurrency and NFTs. This is something that can democratize the entire world. If you have everybody who lives on the edge of a tiger range park who gets a percentage of that fee every single week or month or however often it's deposited into their accounts, they have a huge incentive to make sure that the forests are not being burned down for croplands. They have a huge incentive to make sure that not one single person in their village kills a tiger, because that tiger is supporting the entire village. It can't go into the hands of the governments or anybody who can corrupt that system. It's got to go directly to the stakeholders. And if you think about where these cats live, they live in the poorest areas of the world. And those people should have the same opportunities and lives that all of the rest of us have. And they could have it if we gave them the opportunity to monetize their own environments.
It's almost perfect. It's almost perfectly set up not to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for the time that you've given us today. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that know a lot more now than they knew before.
And if you take one thing away from this, it's what you can do personally without money to save the cats and help. So if US citizens, it was visit Carole's website and sign that damn petition, because in the UK we can't do that. But what we can do is we can call out all those social media bastards that are posting and getting all the clout with the cats.
Yeah, absolutely. And what are you doing at the moment? Is there anything that we can share that you're doing at the moment? Any projects you've got? I know you were lobbying down in Capitol Hill recently. Is there anything else you've got on at the moment that we would be able to advertise for you?
There's all kinds of cool things coming out. I don't know, do you guys have Peacock over there as a channel?
No.
So you probably haven't seen the Kate McKinnon. Do you know who Kate McKinnon is from Saturday Night Live?
Yeah, I do actually. I know the person.
So on March 3rd, she's coming out with a 8-part series called Joe versus Carole. And I just saw the trailer for it yesterday or the day before, and it looks hilarious. So I don't know if it's going to be accurate, just like Tiger King wasn't accurate. But at least people will be entertained. And it's obvious that she talks a lot more about protecting the cats. So I'm hoping people will get that from that project.
Thank God for that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for having time with us, everyone.
It's been Carole Baskin. I hope you've enjoyed it. I really hope you enjoyed it, and it wasn't too strenuous for you to get through.
You guys were lovely. Thank you so much, and good luck with your podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. You've helped us a lot.
Bye-bye now.